Koopa Troopas. Is there a more iconic video game enemy? Maybe the humble Goomba, but really, who's counting? Me, I'm counting. The legacy of these fine creatures begins in 1985 Super Mario Bros. No, those enemies in the arcade game are not Koopas, those are shell creepers. There's a difference, we'll come back to this. Have some faith, please. And they've appeared in basically every Mario game since, from mainline titles to Mario Kart to Mario Monopoly, which is impressive considering they're basically just turtles. So why has their legacy endured for so long? I'll just tell you, it's because of their shells. Here's a fun anecdote. Remember those shell creepers from like 30 seconds ago? Well, in Mario Bros. Arcade, defeating shell creepers is a two-step process. First you bump them from below, knocking them onto their backs, and then you run into them to finish them off. Initially, the game's designers, Gunpei Yokoi and Shigeru Miyamoto, envisioned this as only a one-step process, but added in the second step because it was too easy in playtesting. This two-step process can still be seen in the design of Koopa Troopas, with some slight modifications. But the key difference between a shell creeper and a Koopa is the shell. Allow me to explain. When you bump a shell creeper, it flips onto its back, you run into it, we just covered this, yada yada. But if you land on a Koopa Troopa, it leaves behind its shell, which can be kicked and sent flying along the ground. Of course you already knew that, unless you've been living under a womp. Yes, the key difference is the ability to kick the shell. And surprise, that's what this video is about, kicking Koopa shells. Koopa shells are a genius piece of game design. They're so good, like just trust me, it'll make sense in a bit. But first, we've got to talk about risk and reward. Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of Kirby, Smash Bros, and a very good YouTube channel, names risk and reward as a major consideration in defining what he calls game essence. In his video on the topic, which you should definitely watch, link in the description, he explains the concept using Space Invaders, a game where the only way to hit enemies is to get very close to their line of sight, where they can hit you. You have to risk your own lives in order to reap the reward of a higher score. He goes on to talk about how managing this risk leads the player to new strategies. Risk and reward is pretty central to how we understand game design. Think about how rewards are given out in RPGs. Stronger enemies give more experience, better items, etc. This extends outside of video games too. Think about poker. You have to put more chips on the line in order to increase the minimum bet for the next player, which grows the total number of chips you'll get, but only if you win. There's tons of examples like this. So, let's apply this thinking to Koopa shells. Well, to defeat a Koopa Troopa, you have to put yourself in harm's way by jumping on it. Misjudge your jump and you risk a life. And the reward is threefold. You kill the Koopa, you get some points, and you get its shell. The shell is a boon in and of itself. It enables you to kill more enemies and, crucially, rack up more points. But it also leads to a second bit of game essence, because if the shell bounces back and hits you, well, that's a risk, baby. So you're not only weighing the risk of attacking the Koopa against the reward of getting its shell, you're also weighing the risk of kicking that shell against the reward of killing more enemies with it. And this is brilliant. Plus it just feels good to do, it's a very satisfying game mechanic. And it's impressive that you can get this much out of a single idea that's as simple as kill turtle, kick shell. It's so basic, and yet it adds so much. I'm working on a game of my own right now. More on that in a future video. You could, subscribe if you want to see that or something, I don't know. So I'm thinking a lot about mechanics like this. Kind of re-examining things that I took for granted up until this point. It's interesting to look at games as things that were designed and try and intuit why some ideas were adopted and some weren't. Later games in the Mario franchise have done a lot with Koopas and their shells. For example, in Super Mario World, the Koopas get ejected from their shells when you stomp them, and can kick it back at you. What fun! But for the most part, the basic formula has remained the same over the years, and I think that's just fine. No need to mess with something that works. And that's it. Little mini essay for your busy day. Let me know what you think. Any simple but brilliant mechanics you have your eye on? Tell me about them. Anyway, catch you later.